So thank you again for being here, and good afternoon. I'm Sandra Snow, the Vice President of the NSFM, and I will be your host. On behalf of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, I extend a welcome to each of you joining us this afternoon, and we would also like to acknowledge that this event and our work takes place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people. We are recording this session and it will be posted on our YouTube channel such that you might share it with your other colleagues and anyone interested in what's going on. This afternoon, we are pleased to have Nova Scotia Power with us, and presenting will be Jill Searle, the Director of Control Center Operations, and Matt Drover, Senior Director of Energy Delivery. We ask that you hold your questions until the end, and if time permits, we will have a Q&A. And if you use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen under reactions, that will put us into a pecking order such that we might call on you for your questions. So I will hand it over to Matt and Jill at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And we also have Emily McNeil with us. She's our Senior Manager of Government Relations. And Emily, did you want to say a few words first?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just briefly, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Juanita and Judy for all the work that we have done and helping involve us in the second webinar. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the members, and it's a timely topic with a storm season upon us, but also just to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and we want to hear from you, and just want you to know there's always a channel in to us for questions or inquiries. So just thank you for taking the time, and feel free to reach out after if you think of anything after the meeting as well. I'll hand it over to you, Matt.
You may want to swap
just checking to make sure
mode. Wait, you're in presenter mode. You got to flip it. Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Not used to Zoom. Here we are. When I click on swap settings, it doesn't allow me to do it.
Okay, well, this will have to do.
We'll just go with this.
Sure.
Okay, so good afternoon. As everybody mentioned, I'm Matt Drover, the Senior Director for Energy Delivery at Nova Scotia Power. My team is responsible for operating the power grid, which includes all of our transmission and distribution lines across the province. And we are a big part of storm restoration for our company as well. We lead storm restoration, and it's actually something that we deal with 365 days a year. As climate change continues in our province, we are actively watching the weather every single day. So what we want to do today was to take some time and go through our storm readiness presentation. It talks about all the work that we do every day to get ready for storms, and the work that we do when a storm does hit our province. And then we'll take some time at the end to talk about our investment strategy and how we're addressing the impacts of climate change as well. Feel free to jump in anytime and ask any questions. Jill and I will be swapping back and forth, and we'll try to answer any questions that you have as we go along, but we can also take some time at the end. So first up, people may have heard in the media or seen outside of that around the hurricane season for 2024. And in May, it was forecast to be a very active hurricane season with about 17 to 25 named storms. And of those storms, 4 to 7 major hurricanes, which is pretty significant for our province. Most years we have much less than that. And while none of these are absolutely forecast to impact Nova Scotia, every single one of them has a chance that it could end up going that way. Thankfully, we're in September now, and knock on wood, we haven't seen the active hurricane season that was being predicted. However, we're definitely not out of hurricane season yet. It typically runs until the middle of November, and from now until then, there's a chance that any storm that's brewing in the Atlantic could end up coming up towards Nova Scotia. And as you know, as a province that is on the sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean the way that we do, most tropical storms do end up coming at least up towards us. Many end up veering out to sea, and some of them fizzle out before they get here because of the colder waters we have in this area. But some of them, like some that we'll go through today, have definitely had a very significant impact on our province and our power system as well. So we've done some analysis of some of the major storms that have impacted Nova Scotia over the last 20 years, and really we have seen a step change in the last 5 years. I won't go through all the details of the graphs below, but the pictures show the intensity of winds in Nova Scotia. And the first major hurricane we had that impacted Nova Scotia was Hurricane Juan in 2003. And while it was a very significant storm with winds much above 100 kilometers an hour, really in the 140 to 150 kilometer an hour range, most of it was concentrated into the HRM area. All aspects of the province had high winds, but those significant damaging hurricane winds were really in the HRM area. Significant damage to power infrastructure in that location during Juan, with a significant restoration after that, but definitely wasn't as damaging across the entire province. And then there's a period of about 10, 11 years where we didn't have a major hurricane impact the province. So we had our first big one in 2003. Our next relatively large one was in 2014 with post-tropical storm and Arthur. And even though a tropical storm is designated as a post-tropical storm or a hurricane or any other name that is associated with a tropical storm, it doesn't actually mean that the intensity is any less. It just means how the wind field is spread from those hurricane winds. So while Arthur was a post-tropical storm, we did have significant winds with it as well. And as you can see, the red part, the most high intensity winds were in the valley part of the province, mostly the west. And then we went another period where 5 years we didn't have any tropical storms and hurricanes. And then we had our most significant hurricane yet, which was Dorian in 2019. And Dorian covered the entire province with winds above 100 kilometers an hour and had those most damaging Category 2 hurricane winds in the South Shore, Pictou County, and northern Cape Breton areas. Huge restoration. At that time, it was the biggest restoration that Nova Scotia Power had ever undertaken. We spent significant amount of time clearing trees, removing damaged infrastructure, and getting power back on to all the customers that had been impacted. So at that time in 2019, it was the biggest restoration we had ever done. And then unfortunately, only 3 years later, we had Fiona, which was even bigger than Dorian, biggest hurricane in Canadian history, definitely the most catastrophic damage to Nova Scotia. And we actually got into the purple level winds, which is above 140 kilometers an hour. And that was in the Pictou County area and into CBRM. But we did have winds much above 100 kilometers an hour in all parts of the province. It really had the strength of Juan and the impact of Dorian hitting the entire province with those hurricane force winds. And then a year later, it's not on this slide here, we had Hurricane Lee impact the province. It was very similar to Tropical Storm Arthur in 2014, not as big as Dorian and Fiona, but still a pretty big impact to parts of the province. So all that to say is that we have seen a step change in weather and especially major storms over the last 20 years. We used to only have a storm every 10 years. Now, unfortunately, we're having major storms every 2 or 3 years. And because of that, we also have to have a step change in how we respond to those storms at Nova Scotia Power. And the next few slides will go through that. Turn it over to Jill now.
All right, thanks, Matt. As Matt mentioned, and off the introduction, my name's Jill Searle. I am the Director of Control Center Operations for Nova Scotia Power. I have responsibility for the team that operates the grid 24/7 and also the engineering teams that support the operators. And I also have the role of storm lead with our Emergency Operations Center. So going back through history, Arthur was the first storm that I ever responded to with the company, and they seem to be getting more impactful as we go along. As Matt mentioned, we do monitor the weather as part of our control center operations on a daily. Oh, you got it sorted out. Excellent. Thanks, Matt.
Some time.
We do monitor the weather on a regular basis at Nova Scotia Power, just as part of our daily operations. And in the event we do see a weather event coming, we have a team who looks at predicting based on the weather forecast where we think the storm impact will be. So we will, if we anticipate greater than 10% of our customers or 50,000 customers being impacted by outages, we will enact our emergency services restoration plan and open our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. That is leads from across the business all come together in one spot, from safety, logistics, field operations, generation, control center operations, and our IT support systems to figure out how best to respond to the storm. So we will pre-position our crews where we think there's going to be impacts, and then of course, once the storm hits, we can adjust based on what the actual findings are. In advance of storms, we do meet regularly with the province around different planning for storm preparation, getting ready as best we can, and coordinating our resources with folks like Department of Transportation and EMO. And while the EOC is open, we do work directly with EMO and have representatives in their PCC while they're stood up to be able to deal with escalations that come through from smaller municipal EMOs across the province, and of course from the provincial EMO as well. So one of the ways we do prep for an event, if we predict damages and we're opening our EOC, is we will reach out to contractors across the province and outside of the province if necessary, and bring them in so that we have the right level of staffing that we think we're going to need to respond to the event based on the weather forecast. If you want to turn to the next slide, Matt, and if there's anything you want to add as I'm going through, feel free to jump in. So this talks a little bit about those contractors. The graphic there actually shows our field crews in both Dorian and Fiona. And you can see that the response for Fiona was understandably a little longer, but we will go to neighboring provinces. We're part of a mutual assistance aid group that is all over the northeastern North America. And we will bring in power line technician contractors, vegetation crew management contractors. We'll also get traffic control, which isn't something you would think about, but from a logistics perspective, when we have crews out on the roads responding to outages, we need to make sure that they're set up in a way that's safe, that they can respond. I believe this graph would also include what we call our damage assessment crews, and they're not contractors, they are internal to Nova Scotia Power. And those are folks who are tasked with going out, assessing the damage and bringing that information back to the EOC so we can best prepare what our response is going to be. We don't want to be 2 or 3 days into a restoration and then be getting our first sights of an area that's been harder hit. So we want to make sure we understand the full scope of what the restoration is going to be. Next slide, Matt.
There you go.
Yeah, so speaking of Fiona, I know it was a couple of years ago, but it's still very fresh in our minds at Nova Scotia Power. But one of the innovative ways that we responded to the damage, because it did end up being the hardest hit in the Cape Breton area and in the Pictou area, was we took our standard EOC, it remained in Halifax, but we then took satellite EOCs and set them up in the Northeast and in Cape Breton so we could better respond to the localized damage there. And our logistics team pulled together staging areas so that they could house, feed, provide security for contractor line trucks, all in centralized areas. So the Mayflower Mall in Sydney was one of those locations, and the Pictou Wellness Center was another. We also used those locations to coordinate with EMO, both local and provincially, and we did coordinate the assistance of the military who were brought in to help support in that event. So everybody would come, have a morning safety meeting at the staging area, get their work orders or marching orders for the day, and then head out to respond. They were sent with packed lunches, and they were able to leave their trucks there at night and go back to their hotels, or in some cases, cots in community centers, because we filled all of the hotels in the area, and I know that their trucks and tools were secure. All right, next slide, I think. Yeah, so just talking a little bit about how we do restore our power, we do have a bit of a hierarchy. It is outlined in our emergency services restoration plan around like how do we decide where we go first. And it's really a set of criteria that has to do with, we deal with public safety, downline, live wire situations first. Then we move on to outages that affect our critical infrastructure. So our substations, our generating stations, our transmission lines, anything that's required to restore the bulk power system. Then we'll start working with continue to work with EMO. And if there's any critical infrastructure from their escalation process, hospitals, sewage lift stations, things like that from a public health perspective, we'll prioritize those restorations. Then we would go to our feeders or circuits along the roadway. The ones that you see on the poles with 3 lines, those are 3-phase circuit. Those would carry electricity to the majority of customers. So we prioritize our 3-phase trunk feeders first, then we'll move on to our branch lines, and then we'll move on and finally do individual customers. And often customers will have mass damage, so that needs to be repaired before we can go back and restore the power. We understand customers' frustrations because oftentimes they'll see our trucks in the area and then we leave and they don't understand why their power hasn't been put back on. But it would typically mean either we were there to restore critical infrastructure or a 3-phase line, and they may be a customer off of a 1-phase line. And we're definitely coming back, but the priority is to continue with those 3-phase restorations as much as possible. All right, is there another slide for me? I think there might be.
One more thing.
Yeah. So this is just to say that the EOC, Nova Scotia Power, continues to operate in our storm mode until every last customer is restored. And then even when the power comes back on, our work isn't done. So we will use those damage assessors that I talked about earlier. They'll go out after the restoration and do what we call feeder sweeps. So they're looking for additional damage that could, in the next slight gust of wind, cause outages. And they're also, as we repair our outages, sometimes we'll put a temporary fix in place just so we can get the power back on. And that's noted. And then we go back out. So before our contractors are released, we'll go back out, we'll fix our temporary repairs, we'll take down danger trees. And I think the number there is about 10,000 trees after Fiona was completed and the outages were restored that we took down because they were either leaning over our lines or in danger of causing further outages. So I know where customers are happy when the power comes back on, but we continue to work diligently until we clean up some of the potential threats to future outages. Anything you wanted to add, Matt, to that summary?
No, I think that was a great summary. The main message we wanted to leave you all with is that, like I said at the beginning, we look at the weather 365 days a year. We know how impactful storms are to every single Nova Scotian. And because of that, we tackle storms in 3 phases. All the prep work that we do in advance. Joe talked a lot about the crews that we bring in before storm hits. We want to make sure that as many people that are helping us with storm restoration are in the province before the weather even happens. Then the big bulk of it is all the coordination work we actually do during the restoration to get customers back on. And then finally, as this slide shows, there's a significant amount of cleanup that is done even after all the customers are back on. So rest assured, we take storm preparation and response very seriously. And like I said at the beginning, as climate change continues and affects our province differently with weather, we'll continue to have step changes with the way that we approach this as well. So we have just a couple more slides to go through and then we can open it up for questions. So like our step change in storm restoration, we know that the biggest impact we have during those major storms are trees falling into our power lines. The number one cause of people's power going out is a tree falling either into our line and causing a power outage or causing damage to some of our equipment when that tree falls on the equipment and having to go out there to make repairs. Because of that, over the last 5 years, where we've seen such a significant increase in the winds, and what we really track are winds above 80 kilometers an hour. When winds get above 80 kilometers an hour, that's when we start to see those healthy trees, either tree limbs or full trees, come down into power lines. So we've been analyzing winds above 80 kilometers an hour, and over the last 5 years, the number of hours each year has gone up significantly when it comes to 80 kilometer an hour winds. So significant change in the hours of winds above 80 kilometers an hour. So because of that, we need to invest more in reliability, invest more in removing trees, and invest more in upgrading our equipment. So we've been doing that over the last 5 years. And I'm happy to say in 2024, we have our largest reliability program ever at Nova Scotia Power. We're spending $230 million this year on reliability and $45 million of that program on widening our right-of-ways, so widening the area around power lines, removing trees further away from lines, and making sure that when those trees do come down during major storms, they're as far away as possible from our power lines. We don't own any trees in the province, so that is a collaboration. In order for us to do that, we do need to get permission for every tree that we cut. And we know how beautiful our province is. Many people remark when they come to Nova Scotia about our beautiful tree coverage, and we get that. We love it too. However, we do need to minimize the impact that those beautiful trees have on our power lines for all of us. So we do ask permission. We do work very closely with municipalities and landowners to get permission to remove trees. In some cases, people don't want us to remove those trees. And we will go back and ask again multiple times just to see if people change their mind. And especially after a major storm like Fiona, people sometimes change their mind after they've recently lost power. So it is a big part of the program. And the only reason I bring it up is that we obviously do a lot of work with all the municipalities across the province. And we'd be open to doing more of that. And any partnerships or collaboration that we can do with local landowners, we'd certainly be open to that as well. We want to, as I said before, trim as many trees as we can away from our power lines. And in addition to tree trimming, we also focus on our equipment and moving our power lines out of the woods. So historically, many of our lines were installed in wooded areas that are difficult to access during storms and power outages. And it's difficult to get to those as quickly as we can. So a big part of our program is moving lines to the road, and also on changing assets like power poles to stronger and larger poles, and changing some of our insulators to make them more robust to weather. And then finally, I see there's a hand up. Just one more point I'll make on this slide before we move on. Finally, we did stand up at the beginning of 2023 a new reliability team. So all the people across Nova Scotia Power that work on reliability as part of their day job, we all have storm roles. We all work on storms when we're actually restoring power. But daily, there are many people that have a storm role, and they're part of this new reliability team. We have a director of reliability, and we also have 4 reliability advisors across the province right now. One in the west, one in the HRM area, one in the northeast, and one in the eastern part of the province, Cape Breton area. And their main focus is to be out there talking to the public, talking to government, talking to any stakeholder in the province about reliability, gathering feedback, and incorporating that into our investment plans going forward. I see Fraser Patterson, the question.
Thank you, Matt. Greetings from downtown Ross Ferry. Just the comments you made a few minutes ago about the removal of trees. You do or can remove them on the right of way of the highway correctly without having to get permission, right?
That's correct.
There's often a misunderstanding among homeowners of which trees they actually own and which are part of the right of way. I've had situations where, you know, like you said, they took my trees. Well, they didn't take your trees because you didn't own them. So, you know, I think that's if we get that message out to people, and obviously, as you said, you're not doing it just because, you know, you don't like trees. We're trying to protect the power line. So that's the main purpose of it. But I think it's important that we get the message out to residents that the highway does have a right of way of 66 feet, and any tree within that 33 feet from the center line, it's not yours.
That's a wonderful point, and I could not agree more. And you're right, we do that communication directly when we're talking to landowners, and sometimes there's a misunderstanding. It probably would be beneficial if we do more broad communications on that as well. Not in a negative way at all, but more of an education standpoint, and that might go a long way. So thank you for that feedback. We'll definitely take that away. Warden Parker, did you have a question?
Mute there. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah. Hi, Matt. You know, and I heard you mention that Pictou County, along with Industrial Cape Breton, was probably hit the hardest in our province in Fiona. And what I heard a lot of complaints about is the length of time. Now, I know you had a lot of extra help here from other provinces or even from Maine, and you were stationed in at the Wellness Center. I'm not criticizing anybody that was out there working hard to try and get the power back, but what is a reasonable period of time to expect your power before it would come back on? Do we have a goal or an objective of a reasonable period of time? I know it's different depending on the intensity of the storm, but and I also know that some people said when you're off for well over 2 weeks, why didn't the Power Corporation cut my bill any? Was the question I got. You know, why I wasn't served for, you know, half of that month. Was there any change to people's billing because they didn't have service for half of the month?
So really good questions, and maybe I'll tackle them one at a time. So you're absolutely right. Each storm is different, and obviously they have different impacts. The way that we work with EMO on that communication is that a typical winter storm that we used to have, 72 hours is what we thought was a reasonable amount of time. We obviously don't want people to be off at all, but we, in our messaging, we said be prepared for 72 hours. What we are seeing with the major hurricanes like Dorian and Fiona that cause such catastrophic damage, it's just not practical. You can't bring in enough people, no matter how many people we have on the ground. Just the sheer logistics of all the trees and damage that need to be done is impossible to have everybody back on within 72 hours. I would agree that 2 weeks is obviously too long. We don't want that at all. But I can't give a goal because every storm is different. Our goal is to reduce it as much as possible and bring in as many people as we possibly can and logistically get as many hotels and coordinate all that. And I fully apologize for everybody being off for so long during Fiona. But to set a goal, it's just not realistic for big storms like that. And then the second piece around the bills during major storms, obviously when people's power is off, they're not paying for energy that they're consuming, and I know that's not what you mean. But when people's power is off, they're not paying for it. But in terms of a power bill break, there wasn't one after Fiona. But there was some contributions from Nova Scotia Power into some other programs and some other aspects there. But that's definitely something we can take away to look at in more detail too.
I think it should be, because a lot of people, it costs them a lot of money to, even if they're lucky enough to have a generator, it costs them a lot of money to keep some in $400 or $500 range to keep those generators going. So I guess if anything, they realized that maybe the power they were getting was cheaper than they thought, but when they had to generate their own. But
Yeah.
I think it's something that should be looked at to when it's off for, you know, beyond whatever measure you put as a reasonable time. You know, you wouldn't expect it maybe if your power's off 2 or 3 days. I don't think anybody's expecting that, but they're off 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know if there's anybody into 3 weeks, but there certainly was lots into 2 weeks. I think ours was 9 days, but I think it's something that should be considered to help those people, you know, with the cost of the storm to them.
That's a good point. We can definitely take that away and look at that in more from a more strategic view for sure.
Thank you.
Mayor Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Look, a couple comments and another question. First of all, I want to say thank you for the information today. It's just too bad the general public couldn't hear and see all this. I think it would help people understand the challenges you face and the efforts being made on their behalf. I always tell folks that no one wants that power back on any more than you folks do when it's out, and I know you make every effort you can. So thank you for that.
For sure.
I also want to say thanks for the planned outage notifications we get. So that means a lot. I know my whole area, I share those as much as I can, and people are very appreciative of that. So anytime there are planned outages, sharing that information is terrific. The other question, or the question I had was something that you mentioned about tree clearing, and I'm just wondering, so folks that have private land are interested in having some trees cleared from those right of ways. Do they just call the regular customer service number, or is there a special number for, depending on the region of the province, where they would call to make that request? Thank you.
So great question. And as I was saying before, we definitely want to do more of that. We want to get into areas where people want to give us permission to cut trees. So the Normal route still works. Absolutely, people can go through the normal route calling into the customer care center, and they'll direct them to the right location in Nova Scotia Power. But now that we have these reliability advisors in place, the reliability advisor for the Northeast would be a great person to reach out to. And we actually just hired a brand new person there. I don't think he's been around to all locations yet, but he'd be a great person that could help direct those requests and make sure that gets done.
And Murray, I can I can connect with you and give you that new reliability advisor's contact info.
That'd be terrific, Emily. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for all your folks do. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Is there another question? I see another hand up.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm standing in for Victoria Brooks, Municipality of District of Yarmouth. I'd just like to say thank you for your presentation from the host, very informative. I do have a question regarding the vegetation and management tree trimming. How does Nova Scotia Power address the areas that they're going to trim? Is that done off an asset management or a condition assessment? And is that posted anywhere for municipalities and stakeholders?
It's a great segue to my next slide. So we have an annual program. It's actually a multi-year program, but we have a very detailed annual program. And you can see on here, all those blue locations are where we had planned to be in 2024. And like I said before, we doubled our program to 45 million this year, which meant we also doubled the amount of contractor crews that we had working. So we had 85 crews this year, about 170 people working every single day on vegetation management. And it is based on asset management principles. So we look at the vegetation condition, the species of tree that's in a certain area, the growth rates, all that various information around the actual power lines, but also looking at the reliability performance of lines. So Warden Parker talked about Pictou County and CBRM being hit very hard during Fiona. We actually targeted a big part of those locations in our 2023 and 2024 program based on their recent reliability performance. In addition to that, this year we actually hired a company called AI Dash to go out and use AI equipment to do a assessment of the entire tree coverage of Nova Scotia and the impact to power lines. So how close it is in proximity to our power lines. So we're working with them right now to turn that into data that we can use to further enhance our programs. We'll now have much more detailed data on growth rates and foliage and all that information to better target our program going forward. But we're always looking for ways to improve it. Like the investment, we want to evolve our program and get the biggest bang for our buck on all the money we spend on vegetation management.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I think I hear there too, Matt, maybe a request for Emily about notification when veg crews are coming to certain areas, and maybe that happens already, but that's probably something we could take away as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We can take that away and expand that communication. Mm-hmm.
Warden Parker, did you have another question?
Thanks, Matt. No, I just wanted to request that same contact information that Murray requested on the reliability person for the northeastern zone. I will say that I've had people contact me and say, well, Nova Scotia Power came out and looked because they didn't want to cut the tree. It was too close to the power lines for them to cut it themselves or have somebody come in and cut it for them. But their complaint, I guess, was that somebody would come and look and take all the information, then they just don't see anybody after that to actually come and do the work. So maybe they're a long ways behind. I don't know, but that's a question I've had asked of me several times this summer.
That's great feedback. If we can put you in touch with the reliability advisor, and he can help with that for sure.
Plus, a lot of people are cutting down their own trees too. That's going to help. They're cutting them down because they're afraid of them falling on their houses or property. So, ones that they're not scared of the power lines. I see a lot of trees coming down on their own up as I drive up down the road here this summer, and I think it's mostly people afraid it's going to drop on their property or especially on their buildings. So.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
Thank you.
Juanita, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, actually, just a comment or an offer that we would be very happy to send out in our weekly newsletter contact information for the reliability advisors, if that was helpful to you to get that out through our members, and any information around it that you have. Happy to send that out as well. I know you have contact from municipalities, but we're happy to double down and help.
We would love that. That'd be fantastic. We want to get that message out to as many people as we can, that these people are there to help and to answer questions and gather feedback. A big part of what we're doing is listening to the feedback that everybody has across the province and how we can do things better. We know that things are changing every single day, and we need to be able to adapt and evolve. So we're certainly open to that, and thank you for the offer. Fraser, did you have another question?
Yeah, just a comment, Matt. A couple of years ago, Nova Scotia Power cleared a rather remote section of Bullardy Island, very few residents and so on. And people were questioning, well, why did it do there when there's very few people live there? So I contacted someone, I believe it was Paula Conrad at that time. And the reason given made sense, that the cell service was very poor in that area. And the company decided we don't want to send people out there if we don't have to, you know. So I mean, it seems sometimes, like we talked about earlier, that they are in your community, but the power doesn't come back on. You know, the tree cutting and clearing. I guess we have to trust you that the company, that all the people that work at this know what they're doing. And you know, it may not make sense to the public sometimes, but I think that's the case in that small story anyway.
That's a great story, and there's probably other examples like that across the province where there are more reasons than just the standard reason for cutting the trees. We obviously try to have as robust a program as we can and get the biggest bang for the buck. But if there was a location where there isn't good cell coverage, and I know there's lots of locations still in the province where that is, but it is difficult to get crews into those locations. So that is a benefit for sure. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions? The last slide we have is just a few pictures of the work that we do during storms. But in general, the last two slides, hopefully the message got across that our program is definitely evolving. We are ramping up our investment. We know we need to do more work to reduce outages, and we take that commitment very seriously. As Mayor Scott said, the last thing we want is for power to go off. That's not a good business model. We don't want power to go out, and we definitely don't want to have that impact to our customers. Thank you all. And if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Debbie, do you have a question?
Yes, Matt, thank you for the presentation this afternoon. It certainly is appreciated. One of the concerns we had, and it's not a criticism, it's just I'm wondering if things have improved in this end. But one of the biggest criticisms that we had down in our arm in the Pictou County area again, and we were very hard hit in the Little Harbor area, was the lack of communication between Nova Scotia Power and the crews that they had in. I know we had a crew from Halifax and a crew from New Brunswick that were supposed to be helping clear the trees and this sort of thing. And in the end, one of the crews from New Brunswick came. We had an emergency center set up at the fire hall. They came to us to see if we could give them some names of people that were needing to have trees removed from the roads and their driveways and this sort of thing. They couldn't get any information from the Power Commission. And we also had a crew from Halifax. They spent a whole afternoon, in the parking lot at the fire hall waiting to get some information from the Power Commission to see where they would go next. And I'm just wondering if that type of communication has been improved or been worked on through the dealings with the aftermath of Fiona. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That has come up numerous times. The Warden Parker's brought that up a few times to me as well, and many other people in your area. Same thing in CBRM. And as you can imagine, with that number of people coming to our province that aren't from here, logistics and coordination is a big part of that. However, we don't want anyone to come in and not know where they need to go. We want them to be able to respond to those outages as effectively as they can. And we learned a lot during Fiona. So Fiona was the biggest restoration of that size we'd ever done. And the things that Joel described before around the staging center wasn't something we did on day one. That was something that was more of a day 4, day 5 aspect. And that did help improve communication. So every morning people would gather together at the Pictou Wellness Center. They'd be given their work packages for the day. They would know where to go. We made a really concerted effort to make sure that all contractors were paired up with local Nova Scotia supervisors so they could direct them in the right locations. But after Fiona and last year, so after Fiona, we did a post-event critique where we went through all of our learnings and we documented them and put action plans together. And then last year, we also did a drill with all of our storm people that are working on storm on another Fiona level event. And there was a few learnings that came out of that as well. And we put together a really good action plan. So communication has been a big part of what we are trying to improve. And I think you'll see if we do have another storm like this, and hopefully we don't, but if we do, that communication will be greatly improved. It'll never be perfect. There's so many different moving parts, but we definitely are focused on making it much better than it was during Fiona.
No, I agree with you. It's 100%. As long as we improve on it, I don't expect to see it totally gone. But an improvement is better than no movement at all. So thank you very much for that.
Sure. You're welcome.
Matt, if your slides are done, perhaps we can go back to our Brady Bunch screen.
Absolutely. Yep. All done.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions for Matt, Emily, or Jill? Well, looks like your slide presentation was very effective. There's no, oh, Fraser's got another question for us. Go ahead, Fraser.
Thank you, Shannon. Not so much a question, just a thank you to Juanita and the staff at NSFM for setting this up. As I mentioned earlier, it's good to be able to contact people that can get things done. And I hate to single somebody out, but I'm going to. Emily McNeil has been excellent in replying to my emails and concerns and so on. I don't know if any of you can give her a raise or not, but I think that would be appropriate. You know, it's important, I think, that, and the other thing that no one mentioned so far is the Resolve team. I've had great luck with the Resolve team, who even at one time patched me through to the crew on the site. You know, so you get really accurate information that way. I do have a bit of a concern with the robot, Robbie, I call him, from NSPI, who says your power will be restored in 12:15 on Tuesday or whatever. I know you have to do that, but I think it's, you know, people get the wrong impression or ignore it completely because, you know, I know you try to make it as accurate as possible, and you have to give a long period of time because you probably don't even know what the situation is at some points. But anyway, again, thank you. And like Mayor Scott said, it's too bad we couldn't have had all our constituents on this call because I think it explained a lot. And, you know, education, as Matt mentioned, is a major part of the game. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that wonderful feedback on the Resolve team. Just so everybody's aware, I'm not sure if you all do, that's a team we stood up last year to focus on daily work. So new power connections, any customer requests that come into Nova Scotia Power. And there are many different types of work that we do. And if people are stuck and they don't know where to go and they don't know how to get their work done, the Resolve team is a great team to go to that can help navigate through Nova Scotia Power. And we've seen a lot of success with that. They're a very knowledgeable team, and I'd love to hear that you're getting great work from them.
Juanita.
Thanks. I also want to say thank you for coming. And Emily, you and I have chatted before, and I find this incredibly fascinating. I think that we have a number of people out knocking on doors right now. So we're very close to election time. So once we have the new slate of councillors in, settled into their seats a little bit, I would love to do this presentation again. I've received a number of texts from people just on this call already saying how great this is and how they think it would be really valuable. I mean, the more the public hears what you presented to us today, the better. It really does explain a lot, just understanding the process. So thank you again. It's been a great pleasure, of course, working with you. And we certainly are strengthening that relationship with Nova Scotia Power, and we really look forward to working with you. But thanks for this presentation.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you all for taking the time.
And I will remind all of our members that this is on our YouTube channel, so it's easy enough for you to download it and play it at a council meeting or at one of your public participation meetings.
We
So if there...
would love if you did that. Please play it wherever you can.
All right, Matt. Well, you know, we can probably share it on some of our websites as well, because you know, most of the municipalities have websites and they have YouTube channels, so it's probably a good way to do it. If there are no questions, we'll end this early and thank Matt and Emily and Jill for their time and for this presentation and for all of you for being here today with us. So thank you.
Bye, folks. I have to go gas up the campaign bus, so.
Best of luck.
Back on the
Thank
trail.
you.
Thanks very
Thank you very
much.
much, everyone.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
see
much.
you.